people are able to join this webinar, which is posted with the YouTube. We can keep trying to get it started. But let me give it another chance. There goes. Okay, you're ready.
Madam President, you're muted.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to reconvene officially into open session at 5:02 p.m. No action was taken in closed session. At this time, I'd like to invite everyone to stand and salute for the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute and pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Pamela, do you have any comments or announcements?
I do not. Thank you, Madam President.
Miss Jessica, do you have any comments or announcements today?
Not at this time.
Miss Nielsen, do you have any comments or announcements to make?
No, not at this time.
Mr. Legrone, do you have any comments or announcements to make today?
None, thank you.
Well, I have comment to make. I am pleased as punch that we are now in orange tier. Silver lining, however long that lasts, and Easter's coming. Kiddos going back to school in T-minus 9 days and counting. I am excited. Spencer, do you have any comments or announcements?
Just very quickly and brief, just wanted to say, let the board know that we are on track to come back to school April the 12th. We have started contacting families that were on the waiting list that were in distance learning and had asked to come back to full face-to-face instruction. We had about 145 families on that list. We're going to be able to accommodate most of those families, but not all of them. Most of our issues are at the secondary. We have more students than we can socially distance in some cases, and with the master schedule, it's a little trickier, but we're still working on it. But like I mentioned earlier, we are able to accommodate most of the families, and I'm still working with those principals to see if there's any other way that we can manipulate and massage the master schedule to get more of those kiddos back into in-person face-to-face. But for the most part, I'm very happy with the progress. We've gotten our substitutes that we needed for social distancing in line. We're getting furniture that we need, and a lot of other things that we needed we have in place. And I think our families and our staff are excited to have kids come back to campus. So, and we are able to provide, the high school is able to provide transportation on Friday for our minimum day schedule kids. And I'm hoping that with our orange tier, we're going to be able to start looking at more capacity for our transportation as well. That still remains to be seen, but I'm hopeful as we continue to go through the tiers that we'll be in better situation with transportation. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add thank you to everyone who's worked so very hard and for their patience and their understanding. Andrew, do you have any comments or announcements?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a public thank you to Matt Wisterman in the warehouse, Sarah Keenan purchasing, Sarah Hinman, and Jim Campolo and the entire maintenance crew. As we're transitioning, as we do these transitions back and forth between learning models, there's a lot of groundwork that has to be done, moving things, organizing things, and they've really been, and purchasing lots and lots of things, and getting all those set up and delivered. So I just wanted to thank them all for all the hard work they're putting in.
Miss Janet, do you have any comments or announcements?
I do have a couple of comments or announcements. We sent out our announcement for summer school on Monday, and so our registration is open. Andrew did a fabulous job of getting on the website our forms so that we have announcements and it's easy to see. We've had the summer school principals have been helping with the flyers and getting everything ready. BCOE is going to partner with us. So in the morning, we're going to be doing 8:30 to 12:30. We'll do instruction of math and language arts, and BCOE is going to do the enrichment in the afternoon. So the kids can stay until 4 o'clock if they wish and get a full program of academics and enrichment. I also want to say that we finished up our last professional development this year for the DOJ, and it was on how to de-escalate when student behavior is starting to accelerate and how to get in there and get that stopped and stop the cycle. Our presenter did a very good job, and it was a good way to end our series on a really good note. I had several people asking if we could bring him back next year. And Kimberly also had to do PD that had to do with special ed from the DOJ requirements. And we were able to rearrange some things at the very last minute, and Kimberly was flexible so we could get that in before all the teachers get back. So now that they're ready to go back, we've wrapped up the PD, other than we'll do a little bit more with PBIS, and we'll be working with the principals on our data. But anyway, finished up our PD series, and so that's really good. And I'd have to say, in terms of all of our changes and shifts, there's no department that does not get touched when it comes to getting the kids back in school. And I think literally everybody has done a fabulous job. Teachers, instructional aides, all the principals, everybody has really been a team effort. So kudos to everybody on the hard work they're doing. So that's it for me for right now.
Sandra, are you still there? Sandra, are you still there?
Okay, Miss Kimberly Tyler, do you have any comments or announcements to make?
I just also want to say
Yes,
thank
I'm
you
still
to
here.
everyone in the district that's been
Can you hear me?
working so hard.
My connection
Yes.
is unstable. Oh, I feel like I'm in the twilight zone.
We heard you. Thank you. Thank you, Sandra.
Go ahead, Miss.
So I did want to let the board know that we will be going back to modified regular schedule with the preschool as well. Initially, we were going to stay with the hybrid, but we feel it's in the best interest of the students, and it's what parents have requested, and the other districts were willing to be flexible with changing up all the transportation routes. And so we're very happy that we'll also be returning to a modified in-person.
That's awesome. Thank you, Miss Kimberly. Boy, for a second there, I felt like I was in the twilight zone. Everybody was frozen but me. At this time, I'd like to invite the invitation for interested parties to speak on matters which are school related. Please use the raise your hand button to be called on to speak. Comments or questions may also be emailed to backpat@ocesd.net. Please include your first and last name in your email. Comments and questions received will be read into the record and or addressed during the meeting. However, comments received without your name will not be shared during the meeting. The Brown Act does not allow the governing board to take action on any item that is not posted on the agenda. Do we have any comments or suggestions by the public?
I don't have any emails that have been asked to be read into the record this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to public comment on action on the action session items. Do we not have any public comment on action session items? Nope.
I do not have any.
Yeah, there's nothing in backpack.
Cool beans. And on to new business. Let's approve the memorandum of understanding with the OETA on COVID-19 safe opening and reopening 2021.
So, Madam President and Board, this is an addendum to our safe reopening MOU that we had with OETA and the teachers earlier in the year. We did an addendum that has to do with our schedule for the rest of the year, which is Monday through Thursday, regular schedule, and then Friday, which is a minimum day. It has language in there that has to do with cap size for classes, for social distancing. Since we've signed this, social distancing has gone down another foot and we've gone down another tier. Teachers, the cap size for classes is 20, but we also have language in there that if teachers would like to have classes over 20, they can ask their principal through written permission to have over 20 students. And we have a number of teachers that have taken advantage of that. To help with that, we have bought some new furniture for a lot of our classes to help accommodate that. We've also bought some additional screening and partitions and things that we would need so that we can continue to maintain safe practices. And just like to remind everyone that masks and all the other protocols that we've had thus far, including temperature checks and hand sanitation and washing the hands and masks and all those pieces are still in place. And all of our principals have redone the schedule so that we can accommodate, additional kids in the cafeteria. Some have even bought additional tables so that we can have more social distancing. So we've been very busy meeting all the needs of this MOU. But we're really excited that we'll be going back to school and 5 days a week. And that's all I have to share. Any questions?
None here.
Okay, seeing no questions, I'd like a motion to approve the MOU with the OETA on the COVID-19 open reopening for 2021.
Madam President, I move that we approve the OETA MOU for safe opening and reopening the addendum.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Jessica, how do you vote?
Yes.
Pamela, how do you vote?
Yes.
Bill, how do you vote?
I vote yes with a very big thank you to our teachers and staff. And I do recognize the amount of hard work and effort that they put into this, and I very much appreciate them.
Thank you. Ms. Sharon, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes, the motion carries. On to our study session. At this time, the board would like to invite interested parties that wish to speak on the items during the study session. Please use the raise your hand button in order to speak or email your comments to backpack@ocesd.net. Please include your name with the email. Comments will be read into the record. However, comments received without the sender's name cannot be read. Do we have any comments?
I do not have any at this time.
Thank you. Andrew?
No comments at this time.
All right, so we have the CARES Act, COVID Relief Fund monies, staffing using the CARES Act funds, school programs, energy, HVAC, painting, fencing, renovating, and the issues with declining enrollment, facilities, and programs for future use. Spencer?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. At this time, I'd ask Andrew to share the PowerPoint that I shared with him earlier, and I'll give Andrew a couple seconds to bring that up. I also sent the board a copy of that PowerPoint. The reason I called for this study session this evening is due to the fact that we are scheduled to receive a great deal of money over the next couple years so that we can mitigate the learning loss and some of the facilities issues and COVID issues that we've encountered in the past year, and some that we anticipate facing in the next couple years. Andrew, if you go to the next slide, please. So the state and federal government are providing an estimated almost $14.47 million in response for learning loss response funding that's going to be over the next 2 to 3 years. I say 2 to 3 years because some of the funding needs to be spent within the next 2 years, and then there's the ESSER 3 monies need to be spent within the next some in the next 2 years and some in the next 3 years. They do have specific and targeted uses. They must be spent according to guidelines. They require adopting plans on special templates and have numerous reporting requirements, and they will be audited. Next slide. Now, board, I will try to go through these slides, and this is all about having a study session. So please stop or raise your hand if you have questions, because this is really about me sharing information along with Andrew and Janet about our future as we look forward the next 2, 3, and even the next decade as far as facilities and things like that. So please feel free to stop me, ask questions, as this is a special board meeting where it's all about us getting feedback from the board as we start to set the vision of how we're going to spend this money over the next several years. Now, to start with, the AB 86 funding is from our state level. And when you heard our governor talking about reopening money, this is the money that we're talking about. Now, we were already reopened in the process, so we are already eligible for this money from the get-go because we started hybrid learning and teaching and instruction in October. Well, we're scheduled to receive about $2.5 million for this, and this is for expanded learning opportunities and in-person instruction. The total expanded learning opportunities will gain us about $1.7 million. And then the instructional paraprofessionals, there's a 10% has been set aside for us to fund our instructional aids to provide extra intervention within the next couple years. Later on, Janet and I will be talking about some of the plans we have to use this money and the time and the whereabouts that we're going to spend this money so that we can maximize what we believe some of our biggest needs. As you can see, homeless set aside was for $51,000, and in-person instruction grant was about $781,000. And some of this money, along with other monies, is what we're going to be spending helping to fund some of our teacher specialists that we'll talk about later. Andrew, next slide, please. So the ESSER, as you can read, is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. And this is really a code name for our COVID money. And ESSER 2 money was $3.7 million, and our deadline to spend that money is September 30th, 2023. So essentially, we have almost 2.5 years to spend all that money. And then the following year, our deadline is September 30th, 2024. So that's 3.5 years from now. And we'll spend the additional $8.3 million. And what this means is we need to spend this money by those dates, or that money goes back to the state and federal government. So we want to spend this money. We want to totally utilize this money between now and 2024 so that we don't have to send any of this money back to the federal government. Now, this is one-time money. And so what that's important to understand is, though some of it has been set aside for salaries and personnel, when I listened to several of the seminars or webinars about this money, they've strongly discouraged us from, buying people long term, or looking at programs that are going to be long term. Now, with this amount of money, there's absolutely going to be some personnel that I'm going to recommend that we buy for at least the next 2 to 3 years, because I think they're absolutely important to go through this next phase. And I'll talk more about that in a couple slides. But what's important to understand is we are looking to use this one-time money to shore up some of the projects that we have in this district that have been neglected for years, not because we didn't think they need to be done, just because we did not have this type of money to perform the kind of construction and updates and upgrades that we needed. Andrew? So I've kind of identified some of the pieces that are essential for us to upgrade at this time. One of those things that we need to be careful of is we want to be able to tie some of these facilities and maintenance ideas back to COVID. If we can justify using our ESSER money, which is basically our COVID money, we can use this money to upgrade and replace a lot of facilities that we haven't been able to afford to upgrade, like I shared earlier. One of those pieces is HVAC systems. Currently, we have numerous systems throughout the district that are over 30 or 40 years old. They need constant maintenance, and we know they are very inefficient. Inefficient in the amount of capacity of ventilation and air that they push through the system, and efficiency as far as energy. They are really very low efficient when it comes to energy savings. And when I say we, Andrew and myself, have talked about bringing in working with some outside professionals to help us get some feedback of how we might want to prioritize these systems. We won't have enough money to do all the systems that we need to do in the district, but what I want to do tonight is kind of go through these slides and then get feedback from the board of how we want to prioritize these. But we're hoping that all the things that I bring up tonight, that we'll be able to prioritize and kind of work through and get an idea. Now, some of these we do have price points that we can share with you, and others we don't. But I didn't want to get bogged down with all the price points. I just wanted to give you ideas and then go through the process. We can tie ventilation back to COVID. One of the big things that COVID said is, hey, you need to be pushing a lot more air through your system. You need to have better ducting. You need to have a lot more ionization and different things. And we feel like if we upgrade a number of these systems, we will be able to spend the COVID money because we can totally justify it by upgrading all of our ventilation productivity. The next thing has to do with paint and our restrooms. We know our restrooms are very outdated. I even had a parent this past week said, one of the reasons why I was discouraged from coming to some of your schools was because your restrooms were so old. And we would like to update and remodel all of our restrooms in the district and turn them into touchless fixtures, touchless sinks, touchless toilets, and also work with the new flooring that has better residual effects with antibacterial and other matters. And we feel like because of COVID, our kids can now go into the restroom and they can practically use a restroom without touching any of the sinks or the toilets or anything like that. And we feel this is a great way to not only update our bathrooms, but be in more compliance with COVID. I also, when I got to this district a couple years ago, I noticed our paint is not in horrible disrepair, but I've noticed that all our schools are different color. And I thought it would be great if we got a little more uniformed, but I also really want to update our school. And a lot of our schools have more of a flat paint on them. So when and obviously not all our areas of our school are high touch points, but when you're walking through the halls, the corners, our doors, our door jambs, and a lot of areas around the school are high touch points. And when you have semi-gloss or high gloss, you're able to wipe those down and the stuff will come off much better. But we also, it also helps not just with COVID, but everything else. And I would like to give our schools an upgrade with paint. I've heard from the last several years that we really want to make our schools more inviting to our population. I want, when families move into neighborhoods and they go by one of our schools, I want them to go, oh, is that the school I get to go to? I want them to be looking pristine. I want them to look safe. I want them to look up to date. I want them to have gardening and exterior planter boxes and all those things, up to date and looking better than they do now. Now, I will say that our maintenance department and grounds do a really nice job with our school sites. But what I notice is they don't have enough time, or our custodians have enough time to go to the next level. Our schools look fine, but I don't want our schools to look fine. I want our schools to look great. I want our schools to go to the next level. And another reason why I want to update our restrooms, another reason why I want to update our paint. And I think we can justify all of what I've talked about thus far using COVID money because it all has direct correlation to it. Now, this next point, the roofing, we have numerous roofs that need to be replaced in the district. And when I took over this district 3 years ago, I had a vision that I was going to be here for years to come, and I still have that vision. And one of the things that we talked about was going out for a bond when I first got here, and the timing never seemed to be right. And I don't think the timing's right now. But we have this influx of money and we have needs. And we have infrastructure needs such as roofing. And I'll talk about some of the other ways we might be able to fund roofing. But we do have some insurance money. We also may have some on the sale of Bird Street that is pending, that we might be able to find some other funds that we don't always count on to replace some of this roofing. Next slide, Andrew. Any questions thus far?
Dr. Oldham, I don't have a question, just a statement. You mentioned landscaping, which I think is awesome. I didn't see it in the other pieces of the discussion. I just may have missed it. But I think looking at our landscaping, if there's a way to do that, I think would be really a good idea as well.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Do any of our schools have metal roofing?
I don't believe so. I think they all have, or there's some kind of composite material with elastomet. I can't even say the word. The plasticky stuff that's on top of it. So I think I don't think we have any metal roofing. We do have metal parts of our roofs, the flashing and stuff, but I don't think we have any actual full-on metal roofs.
Just thinking longevity. And then have we put any any consideration regarding water stations at the schools? I know since COVID, like using a water fountain is kind of like a thing of the past. So is there any consideration of water bottle refill stations?
Yeah. So actually, I'm going to back up a second. Ishii has metal roofs. You know, that was a newly built building.
Yeah.
Nice metal roofs on it. And if we could, you know, take some of the flat roofs like at Central and build a metal roof on top of it, or even a not flat roof on top of it would be fantastic, because it does, you know, it's leak prone. As far as water bottle filling stations go, we are finishing up a water bottle filling drinking fountain grant that and you'll see this in your time in the board. This is something that took 3 years to get, you know, a few drinking fountains, but all the headache in the world. But we did just do that, and we are using some of the CARES fund we have now to do more water bottle fillers throughout the district. So that is a pretty common change we're making already, is
Okay.
focusing on getting those water bottle fillers. And then we're trying to use, and as soon as I get another grant, as soon as I get the amendment finalized, we'll be able to buy scores of water bottles to give to the kids that say, you know, don't smoke, because it's from the tobacco grant, that we can have on hand. So everybody will have access to plentiful water bottles. So that would be a better solution. Because obviously drinking fountains, we have all of our drinking fountains are all either turned off or wrapped in plastic. And that was started at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, just for modernization, and then everybody bringing their own water bottles, and I don't know, just something to consider. And then lastly, my comment about the landscaping and the gardening. I noticed that several schools, Wyandotte, Ulfer specifically, have at one point in their curriculum had a gardening program, or, you know, some sort of special schedule with their classes to do gardening as part of their assignments. And it seems like both of those are sort of abandoned. And I mean, those are contributing factors to the beautification of these schools, involving the kids, not just having a maintained landscape environment. So I don't know, that might be something to consider, as well as getting, you know, these programs or children involved, student involved planting and gardening to add to the beautification of these schools.
Thank you, Jessica. And as we kind of come out of COVID, I think we'll start to have some of those programs come back. And a lot of those programs, like the gardening and things, are usually teacher-led, and teachers will come to us and say, hey, do you mind if we, you know, we'll go to their principal and say, do you mind if we take this plot and plant or do a garden? And you know, 99 out of 100, it's always, sure, you know, we'd love to, you know, support classes and going through that, the life cycle of, you know, of a plant and things like that. So we'll continue to consider that. Any other questions at this time? Sandra.
How about the school?
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a second. Did anybody hear what she had to say?
No, try again. Oh, I think she's frozen in time again.
Okay.
There have been wild criticism, and it has.
Sandra, are you there?
School lunch menu?
School lunch menu.
I'm here.
Okay. Go ahead and re-ask your question, Sandra.
I know it's been well, when I first came on the board, it was a topic of contention because it wasn't very flavorful. We have always subcontracted, my understanding, we've subcontracted through CSU Chico, I think it is, to make up the lunches every day. Andrew, maybe you can expand upon that. Do you remember that when we had that discussion when you first came on? I think it was right after you first came on.
I know we've had periodically complaints about the lunch offerings. I don't know about partnering with CSU Chico. We have our own
Okay.
cafeteria department that has, does food services, checking what students are eating, what students aren't eating is something that they do on a regular basis. As far, there's always going to be I just remember the discussion about fish treasures and how some people really were disgusted by them. And some people, then they have the same, it's a menu item. It's a difficult nut to crack. We do try to offer as many fresh fruits and vegetables as possible. But we're always open to new ideas. Just, I think people have to realize that we're federally funded and partially state funded for our food program. All students at all of our schools eat breakfast and lunch for free, 100% of them. So that's something we're very proud of, a system we got put in place. But we do have to follow all the federal guidelines that say, that have sort of pushed schools into, maybe it's not what everybody's favorite. For example, you can't have white bread. It has to be a whole wheat bread. Even a hot dog bun has to be whole wheat. So there's all these different standards that schools have to follow that we don't have to follow at home, that make it, maybe not as exciting for people as they would like. Though I will share any feedback with Paul, and I do whenever we talk about it. I shared after the last board meeting with Paul about the comments, because it's not above criticism, and we, he does try to offer what he can and try to be responsive. So, but I don't know of a better solution long term other than trying to be more responsive to the criticisms that they get. Though I don't know that they are going out and fishing for those criticisms either. So, but that's something I can continue to talk to Paul about.
Well, and I can share with the board that when I'm on the campuses at lunchtime, not so much this year, but in years past, I try the food. I asked. I go to the cafeteria, cafeteria workers that do a phenomenal job for us, and asked to try, the food. Like the mashed potatoes and turkey gravy is one of my favorites, but we can't have that every day, and we are kind of constrained by some of the federal guidelines of how much sugar we can put in stuff. Like Andrew shared, some of the stuff just isn't as good because the muffins that we have just don't have as much sugar as the Costco muffins that my kids enjoy. But the whole intent is to keep our kids eating as many good products as possible. Fresh vegetables and things, and some kids really love that, and some kids don't. So, thank you for that question. I'll continue with, unless I have any other questions at this time, I'll continue with my PowerPoint. Any other questions? Okay. So some of the slide has to do with, I want board interaction, and part of it, sometimes boards don't really take part in buying a large mower for a district, but in this case, buying a large mower is, $60,000 or $80,000. And so I want to just bring it to the attention of the board that some of these things that we're looking to buy are for long-term support for our district. Some of it won't be, COVID money, and some of it will. Like hiring an additional grounds crew employee or considering hiring an extra maintenance technician may not be COVID related. However, if we buy or hire an extra maintenance technician, that person may be hired specifically to support the renovations of our bathrooms. Therefore, we can pay for, part of his salary or all of his salary if that temporary position is specifically for that very task. Now, sometimes it's hard to find people who can do all those, who are, or someone who is a technician in that area. But that's certainly going to be our goal, is to be able to hire people that are going to fit these certain niches that we can then counteract their salary with COVID money, because they're hired with very specific goals in mind. And my last point was to renovate the student restrooms. We've talked about that, but some of these I really want us to kind of consider as we bring some of these forward, because it's all part of my master plan of making our schools more inviting, not only to our current students, but those students that are moving into our district. And all these pieces play a role. And I want the board to know that as we meet as a cabinet, Janet and Andrew and myself and others, we are looking at the long-term future of our district through the eyes of maintenance and facilities, and as it relates to our declining enrollment. And later we'll be talking about our academic programs as well. Andrew? So other possible funding resources that we might have is, we're still going through the process with FEMA and our insurance companies for the money from the Bear Fire that burnt down Feather Falls. And so every week, Andrew is still meeting with FEMA. I know that we are really making progress in getting to the point where we might start seeing some of that money flow back into our district. We're a lot closer than we were this time last year, but it still may be a little bit of time. The sale of Bird Street, we've talked about that in the past. That is still a process that we're going through, but we do foresee seeing that money in the next year or two, and that's another funding stream that will allow us to do some of the things that we're talking about. For example, roofing. We can't use COVID money for roofing, but we certainly could use the sale of Bird Street. In fact, insurance from Feather Falls and the sale of Bird Street, we can't use that for personnel or for staffing. That has to go into our certain budget that has to do with the renovation and upkeep of our schools. And so that money would be regulated back into those programs to upgrade our existing schools. And then a board meeting or so ago, we talked about grants and working with some local or state agencies to help us look at low interest and energy saving grant programs that would allow us to do things such as solar energy and different things, where it's essentially programs where it funds itself, because we replace our solar power, we pay for that bill, and it replaces what we would have been paying to PG&E. So next slide. So energy efficiency plan, we want to replace low efficiency windows. One, we have windows that some are 50, 60 years old and are not efficient. And not only that is, they don't look good. They don't have us looking like the schools that I want us to look like. And they look outdated. Replace HVAC machines and improve HVAC controls. So we have better controls so that we don't have AC running when we're on spring break and things like that. And we want to be able to improve our ducting, because if we have HVAC systems that are 30 and 40 years old, we know that some of that ducting hasn't been replaced as well. And then I also want to look at the possibilities of adding solar power. Again, with the idea that we replace our PG&E bill with a solar bill, but eventually we pay that off, and then that renewable energy is a cost savings to us in a couple decades. And we're looking to do things that are going to save us money or make sense money-wise right now, but will make a whole lot of sense in the coming years. Next slide. Additional projects that we're looking at, Central School Track. We are working with the thanks of our city manager. We've been a joint venture with the city of looking at updating and upgrading our Central School Track. Andrew, did you want to kind of talk about that? Because we have a couple things that we want to discuss with the board tonight regarding that. Go ahead, Andrew.
Sure. Yeah. There was an idea and a grant through the city of Oroville where the Central School Track would be renovated, not made like the Harrison Stadium, but made into a, add drainage, add nighttime solar lighting, add a lot of fencing, and resurface the surface so it's nice and smooth at a pathway onto the campus from Wyandotte Avenue, to make it a public use area after school hours. Sort of the issue, the place we're at is the project's probably going to cost $350,000 to do. The grant money available is $250,000. So, as we're looking at it, I look at it and kind of think, well, I don't know that we would be, that interested in paying money to have public use of one of our facilities. I think if we wanted to spend $100,000 renovating the Central Track, we should just do so and keep it fenced off as a private track just for the school. Just because I think originally when the money came out, there was more money available, but now it's gone down considerably. So that's something that we're trying to weigh, and I wanted to, if there was any opinion from the board about that, because I do understand the desire to have public facilities available, but I don't see why we would want to try to spend money we have for educating students and student facilities on a public space that isn't specifically for students. Though it does have benefits, the benefits would be you'd have a track that was, new drainage, new surface, but you can get pretty close to that with the $100,000 all by itself. Most of the money in the project is for fencing and solar lighting, because we'd have to fence the track off completely from Wyandotte and Central, and add gates and things.
Is there currently a track program at Central?
Spencer,
I'm not sure. I don't believe so.
There's not currently a track program at Central. We are bringing back the athletic programs for our middle schools next year. We have not had those in place except through the after-school program for several years. I've told the principals of our two middle schools that we're bringing back a full offering of our athletics for next year, to include basketball, volleyball, and some of our other programs. We do use and quite possibly, cross country or track next year as well. We do use the track quite a bit in our PE programs at all the schools that share that area. What we do know is that the track needs a lot of work. It has some drainage issues. Excuse me. It's DG. One of the issues with DG is that it can get very slick over time, and we have had some injuries on that track as well. We really want to partner with our city, and we want to have joint ventures with them, and this made a lot of sense for us, but we just want to make sure that we are looking at all of our options at this time. I do like the idea that families in the area would be able to have a walking track in the evening where it's safe. I love that idea. I love the idea that we're going to be able to, really update. $100,000 is going to do some good work, but the 250 is going to, be better. Bill, go ahead.
Dr. Holtum, I just want to clear up the $100,000 issue. I think there's some confusion on that. We're covering that $100,000 using program income. So the grant will be for the 250. We cover the other 91,000 using program income. So that money will come from us. So the district doesn't have to come with that. The only thing that we're looking to the district for is the Davis-Bacon cost and the monitoring is all.
Okay, I was confused about that.
Yeah, no, I was confused about it too until I started looking at it. And I know the discussion that Ms. Bergstrand and I had was to use our program income because believe it or not, we can only use that money for certain things, and it was inhibiting us from achieving or writing future grants until we spent down that program income.
Okay, well, with that, then my story is very different. The Davis-Bacon money piece was, a few $1,000, which is, would be well worth it for us.
Madam President, and then Sharon.
In the past, we have had several partnerships. I know Mr. Dowell has bent over backwards when we first came to this city, and the kids were going to school at Wyandotte. We had several soccer leagues, specifically from the Hmong community, practicing every night there. There was the tennis leagues. Every day people would, before we fenced the whole school off, there would be all kinds of community members coming through. And for the most part, it was pretty amicable. Everybody, of course, a few people spoiled it for everybody else. And that's why we ended up having to close it off. And Mr. Dowell, like I said, bent over backwards to try and keep that practice going, but to no avail. I know that there's a lot of community members that would like to see that come back.
Well, and we're certainly open to that. We have joint use agreements that we can enter into with local leagues. We have to make sure that we're doing our due diligence with liability and things like that. But most of those programs have their own, liability insurance and things like that. We just have to enter into agreements with them, and we're very open to doing that. I mean, I see our property as, public community property, and I want our kids to be able to use it and utilize it as much as possible. So if you hear groups that are interested in doing that, we certainly, I don't know what the past practice was, but I certainly have no problem working with our local leagues and our local programs to open up our grass area, in the evenings.
What is Feather River Recreational District said about it? Park and Rec.
They haven't really been involved in this conversation to this point. Though I know that we have been talking with them quite a bit about other things. I'm sure they would be very enthusiastic about, any additional park offerings where they could have programs.
And Andrew and I do meet with Sean, who's one of their administrators there quite a bit. And the next time we meet with them, I'd be happy to, discuss any joint agreements with them. Again, as we serve our children of this community. Sharon, you had a question? You had your hand up?
Yes, I think it's a fabulous idea. I'm glad to hear that it could be a joint venture with the city, and I'm really pleased that it could be open and available to our community. So my question is then, would this joint venture continue on for the future with maintenance and upkeep, security? Because there's going to be a lot more things happening after school hours. Will the district then be responsible for that all of that in the years to come, or will that be something we could work on together with the city?
I believe that would be the district's responsibility in the years to come because the district is the holder of the property. So it would be, the things that we built into the grant would be things like, the solar lighting, making sure there's a path that's safe to travel. And we also will have, security cameras that we'll put up on the site that will tie into our systems to have, some level of security. Additionally, I think the main responsibility will be unlocking the gates after school every day. And also part of it was trying to cut down on the cut through because Mesa Avenue cut through is the shortcut. And so the proposal we have in place just has one entrance and exit on Wyandotte Avenue, which is the part of the community we're trying to serve, and not on the Mesa Avenue side. So you'd have to walk clear around, over past Wyandotte to get to the gate to get on after hours. And we hope that will help kind of prevent some of the problems that we have on the, around SDO and Central. We have a lot of people that are just there all the time, walking through. So yeah, but the ongoing maintenance and things would all belong to us because, we own the facility. Anything we own, typically we have to maintain in a safe standard as a school district. And then as far as the night activities go, that's something we would just have to, we already have night activities at our schools anyway. So we would just, have to be aware of, and yeah.
This is Pamela, and again, I don't want to derail the conversation because of what was on there, but Ophir has it's probably at least 20 years old. It might be a little newer than that, but right at 20 years old, it has that fitness stations. And if we're looking at athletics generally, boy, it'd be nice to see that renovated and updated as well. Do you know what I'm talking about over there in the corner, very far corner?
What site was that?
Ophir.
So we're kind of open to all these conversations. And we certainly are looking at all the programs that you're talking about, because certainly COVID won't cover some of those projects, but we are looking to upgrade and upkeep. So that certainly would be something that we could talk about using some of the other funds that I generally talked about this evening. So that answer would be yes. I'm also talking to Stanford about their ropes course and things like that. I have a friend of mine who is an expert in that area, and he's retired, and he's agreed to kind of look at it. Now we also will be mitigating whether a ropes course, if our insurance would cover that or not. But at least we're looking at all those different types of programs that we've had, just so that we have options to choose from. And again, with the whole idea that we're trying to market our district with all these different programs, and that's my goal.
Yeah, and I think that's why I brought up that Ophir programs. I think it's such a simple, I don't know, maybe there's 10 or 15 stations or something. It's such a simple little thing for a teacher to take, their students out for 20 minutes, right? Everybody can run through all the different exercises. It's a really nice, it's very nicely done. It just needs a little tender loving care.
Right. Thank you. And that kind of goes back to, an extra technician as well, because there's just a lot of little things like that in our district that just haven't had the time, just because we just don't have, the time to put into that. Moving forward, Stanford parking lot renovation for drainage. That's been kind of an ongoing issue that we've looked at, and we don't have a specific plan in place right now for that, but just wanted to kind of let the board know that is still an ongoing issue. And for those new board members, the parking lot has some drainage issues underneath it, and so it constantly needs to be patched and repaired, and we're looking for long-term solutions for that. But again, long-term solutions for big projects like that cost a little bit of money. So,
yeah. And Spencer, on the Stanford parking lot, we do collect the minimum developer fees when people are renovating properties in the city of Oroville. And the developer fee money that we have is earmarked right now for that Stanford parking lot renovation, because we know it's going to require, significant engineering, because they're on the side of that hill and the water goes down the hill and under the asphalt, making it kind of like a floating parking lot. So it gets potholes rather regularly, to the point where we have big lead or big pieces of steel we put in the parking lot to cover them up. So we are saving our money, and that's something that is outside of any of the other funds. It just sort of continues to grow, and as we continue to look at that, we're going to start to we'll probably be hiring someone to start to take a real long, hard look at what the plan is for the Stanford parking lot pretty soon, just to get that going, because we're getting to the point with the money where I think we're getting pretty close to being able to do that project. Just depends on the solution. If the solution could be a couple $100,000, but it could be a couple million to fix that problem. And then also, while we're at it, let's fix the configuration of the parking lot the best we can.
You can't see me, but I'm laughing.
Next slide, Andrew. We've talked about the rehydration stations, and as we talked about earlier, those are nearly completed, and we've also added a couple of those into the next process. Some are done, and some are going to be going through the process of being installed here in the very near future. And then the last thing is, last year or the year before, I don't know how long ago it was, but we qualified for a grant for a PSPS generator. When we have the power shutoffs, it seems like every time Ophir is impacted, and most of our other schools are not. We don't know if that's because they're on the same grid as the hospital, and they keep power, but it seems like Ophir is always the odd one out. We received a grant for that, and Andrew, do you have a update for the board on that?
Yeah, so we received, I wrote a grant called the Restart Grant, and we are actively working on getting all of the many pieces in place to put the generators there at Ophir. And I think it's going to be across the parking lot. I'm not quite exactly sure where they're planning to do it, but we're working on getting that done as soon as possible. I know that PSPSs are going to have an uptick, because in the case you hadn't noticed or hadn't heard, there was a judicial decision that demanded PG&E have more PSPSs and for longer periods of time, which I struggle with how a judge determines that, but that's what it was. So we're working on getting that up and operational. It's not going to necessarily be able to operate everything. It might not be able to operate all of the HVAC systems, but it will be able to operate, you'll have an operational kitchen, you'll have operational internet, lights and the things that are our other big regular parts of our day.
Do you have a time frame for that, Andrew?
No, I was hoping to have it on the ground, but a while back. But between the bear fire and, you're sort of stuck with when you're dealing with construction stuff. You're dealing with sort of three big problems. You have the lack of available vendors and things because of everybody's working up in Paradise. You have the bear fire put a big wrench in that because it took a lot of time to where we couldn't access the site and things. And then COVID has really slowed things down as well as far as supply chain. But we are going through the process as fast as we can.
Thank you. Next slide. Any questions before we move kind of into the academic side of our discussion tonight?
Sorry, Andrew, do you have
feedback go ahead, Sandra.
Was Jessica. Andrew,
Oh,
do you
sorry,
have
Jessica.
a link or an article about that judicial decision? I'm just curious for my own personal.
I'll see what I can find. I was actually at a PSPS statewide, what would you call it? Like a hearing yesterday, where all the different utilities were talking about their PSPS plans, and it was actually incredibly enlightening. But they were talking about that judicial decision as it relates to PG&E. So I'll see if I can find that. The judicial decision came down like a week ago. And, you know, I find PSPSs, you know, I live in Kelly Ridge. I find them to be incredibly frustrating. And I'm sure Spencer does too. He gets them more than I do at his house in Paradise. But it's, you know, it's just sort of maddening. It's a maddening thing. And hopefully at least if we're able to get over online with some generators, you know, we'll still be able to have school and not have to close school for a snow day or try to hobble along with
Lanterns.
Lanterns and Spencer telling ghost stories and stuff. So yeah, I'll look for that and I will get that to you.
Okay, and then who else had a question?
Spencer, it's Pamela. I did. It's less a question. I mean, I guess, what are you looking from us? I know you want to talk about the educational portion of it. Are you looking at sort of like, I think this is an A project or a B project or a C project? I mean, they're all wonderful projects, but if you had to rack and stack them, are you going to do that and ask us, or I'm not quite sure what the next steps are.
Yeah, so tonight was just kind of a session to give you all the information and share kind of all the information for you, so you kind of get a idea of what we're looking at, and as far as how much money we have. We didn't put a lot of price tags on some of these things because some of these things like HVACs could wipe out, you know, our whole budget for everything, because those are very, very expensive. And so we're going to put some more time and effort into kind of identifying which ones need to be done and kind of prioritize it from our vantage point. But we also wanted to get your feedback to say, hey, Spencer, in my opinion, this is going to be, you know, our number one consideration. So at the end of tonight's meeting, I will be kind of asking you, you know, hey, Spencer, I definitely want to see the HVACs and the paint. And I don't, you know, and maybe less priority in the solar. But some of those things are not necessarily tied to each other because we can have different funding sources. But I want to be able to kind of hear what your priorities are. So we'll finish this and then kind of talk about that. And then individually, as I meet with you and speak with you, you can kind of think about this and back up tonight with conversations with me individually about, you know, what your ideas are, because we don't have enough time to sift through all of this together as a board. I want you to be able to take it all in, and then we'll work together in future dates. And I might call another study session if you ask for it, you know, where we might go more in depth with the costs. But we do know that Andrew and I will be working with other vendors to start getting costs and getting bids for some of these programs, because we need to do some of this work because we need to be doing some routine maintenance that's long overdue. So I hope that answers your question, Pamela.
It does. I appreciate it. Thank you, Spencer.
So I'd like to turn some time over to Janet to kind of go through the academic side and what we plan to do. The next two slides are some of the things that we want to do and use our money to help mitigate what's called the learning loss mitigation, which a lot of this money is really set aside for. At least, half the money is set aside for these kind of projects. Now, the federal government did say, hey, you have to spend, necessarily half on this and half on that. They did do some apportionment for some areas, but we're pretty open-ended when it comes to some of the programs. They're allowing us to kind of make the decision. But again, some of these are my ideas with Janet's ideas and as we work with our staff. But we, again, at the end, want to get your feedback and kind of either your blessing or your thoughts about some of these positions. So Janet, take it away.
Okay. All right. So as I go through, please ask questions as we go along. I'm happy to interrupt me at any time if I'm not being clear on what we're looking at. So to get started with, we're talking about summer school. And I had just talked about that earlier today, that we're doing 4 hours in the morning, and it will be focused on math and language arts. We've identified key standards for each grade level of what the kids need to focus in on. We're doing pre and post tests so that we can measure growth. And then in the afternoon, we're working with BCOE, and they're giving an enrichment program that has all kinds of cool stuff. And it has robotics, it has sports, art, music, cooking. And the interesting thing is, we did a survey out with parents on summer school and what would they like to do. Those were the top 5 items that they had identified they wanted. So we checked with BCOE and they could offer all of those. So that's our summer program, and it would go from June 14th to July 23rd. And then the extended school year for special ed students, this is a program that we do every year. And these are students who need additional time to do summer school. It is the month of June, and these kids have it written into their IEP. And so they are very targeted on what their instruction is, and they address their IEP goals for that program. When we look at the teacher specialist positions, we're looking at 7 of them to do that multi-tiered system of support. So what we're looking at is, at the elementary school, we're looking at language arts, and at the middle school, we're looking at math and language arts. And what we're looking for is that we would have teachers that could go and push in and help work with kids who we identify as needing additional support. And with that, that would require us to have really good assessments so that we could do targeted instruction and make sure that we are very specific on what we're trying to bring the kids' skill level up to, and doing a lot of pre and post tests with that. And so that would be in the language arts. We're also looking for that position to help do some professional development. We have some new teachers in the district that could help them learn how to do their language arts programs. And it could do a little bit of training as well in terms of some of the latest research or good strategies that would help in reading and get student engagement and student learning up. Our next position, we're talking about hiring an elementary school, a counselor for an elementary school, and then a mental health support provider for the district. So currently we have an elementary counselor that goes to 3 different schools, and we have a half-time counselor psychologist. And so to give more time to each of those schools, because the students have greater needs right now, what we would do is one counselor would cover 2 schools and another counselor could cover the other 2 schools. And then that would allow the one that's part-time and part-time to be able to address where the extra needs to go in between the psychologist and the counselor. Instructional aid time. So if we put our reading coaches in for the language arts time, we really need to take a look at what are we going to do with the math? because the studies are showing across the country, math is where the kids slip the most in their learning loss based on assessments. And that mimics what we saw when we did our iReady assessments. So, and this also addresses the 10% that the AB 86 is asking for. And so what we want to do here is bring in instructional aids and have them do the RTI, that multi-system of support that we talked about in math. Now, a lot of times math is a little bit more challenging to get support in. So what we want to do is we want to bring the instructional aids in a week before school starts and do a training with them. And we'll train them all week, and we'll work on effective pedagogy, you know, what's most effective, and also on skill level 2, and have them practice some of the math concepts that they have to teach and the kids need to be able to know. So we would make sure that we really supported our instructional aids with training. And then throughout the year, we would do some trainings where it would be with the instructional aid and the teachers so that they could have conversations, and then they would be on the same page in terms of which instructional strategies they would focus in on that would be most effective with the content that they're working with. So we'd really want to work on beefing up our ability to deliver instruction, both in language arts and in math through additional trainings. Any questions before I go to the next slide? Okay. Andrew, can I go to the next slide? Okay. And then with our instructional aids that we are really working on for doing the multi-tiered system of support during the day, we also want to do an after-school program as well. The reason for that is that if we take a look here in a second, our parents were indicating what they wanted support with. And so what we want to do is have a program that will have the kids stay after, they'll get a snack, they'll get a recess, and then we'll bring them in and they'll have teachers and instructional aides working with the students and supporting them in language arts, math, and study skills. I'm sorry, with study skills and with math. Andrew, could you skip ahead? I think it's going to be maybe one more slide. I'm looking for a chart. Could you do two more clicks? One more. Okay. So if you look at this here, what we did is we talked about to the parents, we did a survey and asked a variety of questions. One of the questions we asked is, if when the kids return to school, what is it that you think your child is going to need? So the blue is summer school, that meaning wanted summer school. And then the orange is the math, or kind of red. The yellow is language arts. The green is study skills. And then the orange is wellness activities. So 3 of them were specifically for after school support. And we were trying to find out what the interest of summer school was as well. And if you notice, really what came really high are the study skills. Then the second highest is the math. So we'll work with our language arts and our teachers, and we'll develop an after-school program that will address those 2 areas, the math and the study skills, to help the students so that they can catch up. We also this would be a good program for our homeless, because a lot of the kids really need that nice place to study, and it would allow them to get the additional support at school. Plus, we're going to have snacks for them as well. And it was really based off of this is kind of what set our criteria of what we were going to do with our after school program. Okay. Hey, thanks, Andrew. Would you go back up? I think it's 3 more slides back up. Yeah, thank you very much. And another thing we were identifying was the mini grants for teachers and staff. This is something that Andrew facilitates, and they're getting a great response from teachers right now that would allow them to pursue some very specific areas that teachers would like to pursue. And we talked about that earlier tonight. I think like one teacher was wanting to really increase their garden. I've heard a couple teachers wanting to do tutoring, but there is a wide variety of things, and Andrew facilitates that, and we've got big interest there. Technology infrastructure. as we continue to gain more technology, we may need more infrastructure, whether it's increasing our bandwidth or different things. We put this in here just to take a look at and to make sure we think about, because one, that's good to do when you're looking at one-time expenditures. And in addition, we have really increased the amount of technology that we are using. And we really are hoping and are going to be facilitating discussions that we did learn some great things through distance learning and effective strategies that we want to still use and keep in the classroom. So our technology usage is going to continue and expand. So we want to keep open what infrastructure we may need to make that work well. Staff training. This is a great opportunity to continue with the training. We have done some training. We talked about training more with math, and we talked about training with reading coaches. We also need to look at some of the training the DOJ is asking, which is very, very targeted to what our needs are. So they're asking us to do more training with trauma-informed instruction, and we look at distance learning as one more trauma that kids may have had occurred during their time. DOJ is asking for more SEL, social emotional learning, which is absolutely something we need to be paying attention to, and the well-being of our kids, because being at home has been very stressful for many people. And we're also going to be continuing the culturally responsive PBIS and bringing in some restorative practices. In addition to that, we also still have new staff that we need to give them some additional training and support with, along with, as I talk about the MTSS, the multi-tiered system of support, that really takes a coherent curriculum that is well-defined, paced, and assessments. And so we would need to be building assessments that would line to help the teachers know what are our targeted instructions, and then to measure, did it work after a set period of time. So there's a lot of background curriculum instruction that really needs to occur for us to be effective and make the most use of the plans that we have identified moving forward. So this will expand our committees. We also recognize, as we look at our committees, that our history books have been long overdue for an adoption. And our science, we got new science curriculum this year for the middle school, but we did not for the elementary. So next year, we're looking at going into the year and getting started on a history adoption. And this, we talked about it in curriculum committee, and we felt that history was important. If we end up doing the kids have to go home for quarantine or anything like that in the next year for a week or, whatever time, we kind of thought the history would be great because we're looking for history that also has electronic components. And we felt that that would be a good one to test when we have to send the kids home for a week and then bring them back. So it will be a good time to really test how well the electronic portion of the curriculum is. So we'll do history next year. And then the year after, we want to pick up the elementary. Science is an expensive adoption because with science, you always have the lab equipment and stuff that needs to get provided to support the program, or the program does not perform like it's designed to. So that's an expensive adoption to do. So we'll be looking at doing that the following year. Then we also want to think about how are we going to expand our broad course of study. So what CTE classes do we want to offer, or what additional classes do we want to offer our students at the middle school to make a richer experience? So Andrew, would you go down 2 slides for a second? Thanks. So if you look at this, again, during the parent survey, one of the questions I asked them is, you can see if we offered additional programs for students, please rate if the following is a high interest, a mild interest, or no interest, or not a priority. So you look, blue is the highest interest, and then orange is the mild. So you kind of look at where your high blues are. Visual and performing arts came out really high, which is what it came out for the after school program as well. Visual and performing arts came out as the #1 answer. Then you will also see that career tech was of interest. Music was very high. And then we did have some interest in technology and the robotics. Not as much as the visual and performing arts, which really surprised me. They really want the art. They were very specific. They want art, not really VAPA, visual and performing, but the parents responded with art. And then music was the second one. So we kind of want to look at what do we want to offer at our middle schools that, or our elementaries, that will broaden their course of study, and it will also serve us so that as kids are thinking about, do they want to stay with us or go to a charter school, what would help drive them? And also what would engage them? Some kids come to school for sports. Some kids come because they love the art. I had a child who he couldn't wait to go see if they were doing science experiments. That was his thing, you know. I know some kids will come for any art activity. So anyway, so based off of that, and then could you go one more chart for just a second while I'm here? Then we asked him, if we did do CTE and we did do some kind of a career tech for middle school, what would be your most interest? Our highest interest, so you can see the labeling, we did construction, cooking, animals, health and nutrition, animation, agriculture, and woodworking. And that was a combination of some of the things that I've heard kind of been up and coming. Some agriculture I did because I thought it could, thinking about the community, what might be of interest to them. And some people suggested other ones. So those were the ones we put out, and we put other. And what we found is cooking, and then the animals and the health and nutrition were our highest interest. So as we think about what we want to do for magnet programs, we may want to keep this into account. We had 300 parents respond to this survey. And so that gives you a sense of what kind of response we had. So Andrew, could you go back to, sorry. Okay.
And we know a number of our parents are parents to multiple students in our district. So if we had about 300, on average, if we had 300 parents answer, they're representing between about close to 450 to 500 students. But still, we'll continue to talk with parents and look at ways to gather feedback from our parents. Because although that's not too bad for a survey, we usually get about 20 to 25% of our parents that respond. This was about 20%. And so we'll continue to ask those questions as we move forward. Thank you, Janet.
Yeah. And so that kind of goes into talking about our declining enrollment when we look at what our different programs are and what the community interested out there is. And that was just trying to start the conversation and try to dial in where parents are at and what their interests are what their interest levels are. If we don't find a way to really capture the interest of our parents and our students, then we do know that in a couple of years, there could be growth at some charter schools, and we could be facing some declining enrollment concerns. And with that, we have two choices. We either try to maintain or grow our program, or we've got to then think about what kind of reconfiguration we need to do with the schools and how are we going to consolidate, because then we cannot afford the program that we currently have. And we'd have to take a look at that. Other ideas include making one of our middle schools a magnet, or both with their own identifying focus. So like one could really be into the math and the science and doing like a STEAM focus. The other one could be a VAPA, doing the art, the music, the dance, and it could be that focus. We are looking at bringing back sports for both sites next year. And that was the other interest that we saw in the summer school what they wanted for the summer programs. Everybody was looking at having some sport activities. And we're looking at other alternatives to support growth and interest. So this isn't an exhaustive list at all, but this is certainly how we're getting started at looking at how we can grow it. What are we hearing from our folks, and how can we meet the needs of our community? Our other two things that we're taking a look at is expanding Ophir and growing that school, because that is a school that we do get a lot of requests for. And also looking at Oakdale and turning it into a K-8 school. We do have some of those folks that when it comes to 7th and 8th grade go to another school. And we're really thinking that if we could take that site and turn it into a TK-8 school. A lot of good research on the effectiveness of K-8 schools. It creates a very good, strong sense of family and community. And that could be one way to grow some interest, is those parents who don't want to move their kids to a junior high would then be able to keep them at a K-8 option, TK-8. Okay.
Janet, can I jump in?
Yeah. Oh, please.
Board, this is, of all the issues that we have in our district, as far as from a fiscal standpoint, the declining enrollment is our biggest concern. And we've talked about some of the charter schools in our area that are expanding. We talk about a lot of different things. But there's a couple things that we have to do. And one is, we need to look at programs that are going to entice our families to stay with us. I had a family today that they are very happy with our elementary program, but they're looking for alternatives when it comes to our middle school programs. And so what I've asked that parent to do is go and visit with our principal and her local middle school, because they're basing some of their decision just based off of reputation. And some of it I think is very unfair, and some of it might be justified. But with the idea of looking to, reconfigure or reauthorize, one of our middle schools as a magnet, or maybe both having their own magnet, is to try to facilitate growth and motivation for our kids, that they want to tell their parents, hey, I really love esports, which we already have. I don't want to leave that opportunity, but I want to make that for all kids, because some kids like esports, and other kids like, the regular sports. And then some kids like, some of the other offerings that we may or not have at this point. And we're looking to have offerings that's going to draw in kids and keep our kids and want to connect our kids to our schools. And so tonight, we wanted to throw out this slide so that we could continue our conversation about, possibly starting our own magnet or charter school at one of our middle schools. We're looking at maybe reconfiguring Oakdale or expanding Ophir. But before I start taking a big bite out of this thinking, I want to get the feedback, and I want really specific feedback from our board tonight in the direction. Now, we're not going to be voting on anything, but for us to kind of put this kind of together, we're looking at probably, we're not looking at this August, we're looking at a year from August of doing this, these type of programs. But we have to start now if we're going to make sure that we have the right facilities, make sure that we have the right personnel to carry out some of these ideas. But I want to make sure it's very clear to our board that this is going to be coming from the board and the community as we work together to build this district. So is there any thoughts that any of you have right off the bat regarding this? Sharon?
Yeah, I like the idea of having two magnet schools. I think if we have one, that we'd have to choose. STEM or VAPA, and then we're going to really disappoint a large percentage of parents and students. So if we're going to do one, I think it would be best to do both, to do a VAPA and a STEM. I think that those could both have big draws. And I like the idea of potentially having a TK-8 school, because I know that that does appeal to some parents, some families. So having that one option. My concern is the expanding OFER. If so many people are requesting OFER, why not identify what it is that's so appealing about OFER and try to duplicate that or replicate it for other sites instead of expanding the one location? Let's take some of the things that are working well there and offer those then at other schools' locations, so that those will be more appealing rather than drawing more people into the one location.
Thank you, Sharon, and I'll appreciate your feedback. And the one thing I'll comment on is the OFER. So just really quickly, I know we're running out of time here. OFER doubles or triples everybody else's academic scores. Butte County on average has about 30% proficiency rate. The state of California has about a 40% proficiency rate. OFER is in the 50 to 60% percentage rate for proficiency. Our schools, depending on which, the other ones are around anywhere from 20 to 30% proficiency. So we're running below the Butte County average and about 10% behind the state average. And an OFER is outperforming the county and state by a wide margin. And it's actually outperforming all the other districts in our area when it comes to that. And we most definitely are trying to replicate those scores. My first year, we had phenomenal growth at all of our elementary and middle schools after the first year. And then since then, we haven't tested because of COVID. And so I am absolutely looking to replicate the good things they have going at OFER. You know, they have a phenomenal reading program, which you know, we're trying to expand to everyone, you know, with AR and all the other things that that we're doing now. We've kind of gotten off track for the last year for obvious reasons, but that's one of the things that's a big draw is when people do the research in our area, they see the scores and the rankings, and OFER's, you know, outperforming everyone. And so we're just looking at absolutely of getting our other schools up to par with them. And that's a major goal of mine, but that's going to be a multi-year project, because going to the level of OFER right now from an academic standpoint is going to take several years to do. And we're on track, on the right track, meaning we are building that capacity. We did see some really good growth at our other schools, but we're not quite there. And so that's why parents are gravitating to that school, because they see that academic, that piece.
Is it a less diverse school than other school sites? Is that a factor in the reason that their scores are so high, and maybe we need to address it more seriously, that meeting the needs more equitably at the other school sites so that they can have better opportunity to increase their scores?
That is certainly one factor. I think there's a lot of different factors that attribute to that. It is on paper, it is probably a less diverse school, and you know, all of our schools, you know, draw from their neighborhood, and it is probably less diverse in some sense, but in other senses, you know, it has a lot of the same programs. It does have diversity. It does have, you know, multiple special ed programs, you know, so I would say that the answer to your question is yes and no. Some of those pieces definitely attribute to it, and then there's other pieces that don't. And I don't think we have time to go into it tonight, but I can talk to you more specifically about it as well individually as we kind of, as I work with the board to educate and prioritize what we're doing. Jessica.
I had a suggestion perhaps for retaining more of our students to our middle schools or even to other schools, of having a school preview day, like somewhere along the lines of open back to school night. Hey, come preview our school. Are you interested? Are you signing up? Are you, come take a second look at Central. I know what you've heard. Come take a second look at Ishii. I know what you've heard. It's all here. It's a small town. I heard this. I heard that. Let's get them in to see. Also encourage, keeping these kids in the same groups. My third grader's going on to fourth grade, going on to fifth grade, going on to sixth grade. Let's all stay together and do this as a team, because we're getting to know these people over these years and we're going to graduate them on together, So I don't know, opening up for a preview day might be something that families, newcomers into the area, people moving into different districts might be interested in seeing and doing.
Thank you, and I think that's a good idea that's been shared with us, and we've done some of that, but probably not as much as we should, and I think it's a great idea. And like I shared, that one parent that doesn't want to go to our middle schools, and I'm afraid it's based off a reputation. And so what I'm going to have that parent do is, before I sign that interdistrict transfer, that parent has to go visit their neighborhood middle school and visit with the principal so that she can say, hey, come look at our programs. Hey, look at what we have. Hey, this is what we have to offer, so that they can hopefully break down some of those some of that gossip or that hearsay that they might be hearing out in the public arenas. But I think that the preview is a great idea. Other ideas, other thoughts?
Spencer, this is Pamela. I love the Oakdale TK8 idea. I think that's a really cool idea. I haven't been over to Oakdale often enough to understand how much space everyone has, but boy, I love that. I actually always thought that if we did a magnet school, that it would be a combination. So it would be a STEM or at least part of a STEM, as well as part of an arts altogether. And I don't know, my vision was I was sort of thinking like Central would be a great place for that, because then it becomes that whole complex of Sierra del Oro as well as Wyandotte Academy. And I don't know, I kind of like combining sort of two slightly different tracks into the same location, I guess, facility. And Central makes a whole lot of sense just because of its size. Anyway, that was, I had one other thing on the piece that Janet did. Thank you, by the way, Janet. On the mental health thing, one of the things that was in the slides was sort of, hiring one. I just would like us to consider, if we're thinking about a mental health aide, oftentimes, sometimes you have children or people who need mental health counseling, just for a very short period of time. Oftentimes they need it for a much longer period of time, and it might not just be once a week, it might be twice a week. So by the time you travel and you go here and you go there, and you're talking about 30 or 45-minute appointments, we've got a lot of children. I just like us to look at that and say, is one enough? And that would be my feedback there.
Thank you for that feedback. As far as to kind of answer your questions a little bit, Central definitely gives us more opportunities to expand programs, because we have a lot more room at Central than we do at Ishii. And so there's definitely some pieces as far as expanding or utilizing extra classrooms and things like that, that's much more available at Central than ever would be at ISHE. ISHE, as far as space, is maxed out at this point. Central, at this point, I have entire wings that are empty right now, just because it's a much bigger campus. So that's something for us to think about as we kind of put together more, take your feedback, and then what we plan to do is come back with more concrete ideas, that would turn into, board action items. As far as the other piece, part of this money from the Fed and state government talks a lot about the social and emotional well-being of our students. And so we look at the money as a 3-year process. And what I'm proposing is that the board tonight will kind of say, yeah, Spencer, come back with more specifics about hiring, at least one additional counselor. When we went out and hired an additional counselor a year and a half ago, it was hard to find one. We had very, very few applicants, like just a handful of applicants. And I'm hoping that if the board kind of gives me if everybody's kind of in agreement, which as I've talked to you individually and tonight, I hear people saying, yes, in fact, we might need more than 2. I do want to share with you that I did offer employment to someone today who also has a master's in social work and has done ERMS, or mental health support, for another district, and looking to tap on him as well to support our mental health approach. So I'm looking to even get more than 2 additional people because some of the money has been dedicated for that purpose alone, and 2, we need it. We need it. And so this is where kind of our starting point is at, is 1 counselor. And then when I say mental health support provider, I'm talking about an MFT, which is a marriage and family therapist, or a social worker, someone with a background that can deal with some of the heavier traumas, and some of the heavier therapy that may need to take place in our schools. And I've already reached out to some individuals that have worked in our schools through some of the local agencies and kind of recruiting them to help support us. But I wanted just to kind of give the board an idea that, hey, this is the direction that I want to go. And if you say, hey, Spencer, nope, I don't think we should spend the money that way, now's the time to tell me. But right now, that's the direction that I'm kind of moving the district in that direction. And so, and if we need more, you can always recommend more. That's just to kind of start off with the process.
Thank you. I fully support this and the earlier discussion around facilities and maintenance, restrooms, roofing, HVAC, those sorts of things as well. I mean, I think, God, I want to make them all A priorities, and you can't. So yeah, I would really love to see where you and Andrew sort of fall out on those sorts of more physical things as well.
And so thank you, Pamela. And so what we'd like to do is, we think all the things that we've identified tonight are 1A and 1B type priorities. And we're going to try to address all of them. We may not be able to address all of them, like all the HVAC systems or all the roofs, but we are going to start prioritizing which ones need to go and prioritize which projects, because like I said, I think all of them need to be done. Some of them may be done in our first phase. Some of them may be set aside for maybe a bond that we go out in a year or two to finish off some of these projects. But right now we have a lot more seed money than we've ever had before. And this might also help us in a bond where before we were looking at going to a bond that, was 15 or 20 million. And with this kind of money, it may only have to go out for a $10 million bond, which is, would be a lot more appeasable to our voting block and would not raise taxes nearly as much. And so, we're looking at all these things. And with that being said, is there anything that in the eyes of the board where you're saying, hey, Spencer, this is my absolute number one? And is there anything that you said, hey, Spencer, I think this should be at the bottom of our priorities, just so that we can, as we move forward and prioritize these, as far as how much they're going to cost us and things. Is there any kind of thoughts out there right now?
Well, one of them was Andrew and Bill were talking about the central school track. It seems like now that we have some clarification on it, that should just kind of go forward. That seems like a really good one. Other than that, I mean, like I said, I think all of these things that you talked about, the physical stuff, restrooms, roofing, HVAC, I mean, it's just, there's shades of, a project, A1, A1.2. I mean, for me, they all seem really worthwhile.
Okay. Anybody have any other thoughts that they want to share, or anything that they, other ideas that that we've kind of overlooked at this point? Sharon.
Yeah, one other thing that I thought of is I don't know if you do it now, but mobile dental and vision services. If you do it, expand on it. I mean, that's something that a lot of our lower socioeconomic kids don't have as much access to. Would be nice to have more of that available through the schools.
Yeah, so that's something I've worked with quite a bit in my previous district, and haven't so much in this district. Typically outside, medical groups approach districts, and that's how we kind of form partnerships. I haven't had that, those kind of connections since I've been here. People haven't reached out to me that I know of, but I certainly can talk with our district nurse and the county to see if there's any programs out there that provide that kind of service.
Spencer, Northern Valley Indian Health does have a service, and if you need to be connected with them, I can make that connection for you.
Okay. Thank you, Pamela.
I think they have 2 mobile units.
And I think that Wyandotte had was trying to line something like this up a year or two ago, but there was some, I can't remember what it was, but there was some kind of difficulty they were having that I don't recall, but it'd be good to revisit it. But Spencer, you might want to talk to Todd Dowell.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts? Okay. Well, that's all that we have this evening for this board study session. We will now, as I work with you individually and as you kind of let these ideas soak in, I sent you this PowerPoint so that you can review. If you have other ideas, email me and I'll be reaching out to you individually as we move forward, as we look to start putting price tags on some of these items. And as we get more information from Feather Falls and FEMA and other revenue streams, we'll kind of prioritize what we need to do. From the academic side of the house, we know it's going to be to hire some of these people, and with the idea that when we hire these people, that it's going to be a 2 to 3 year position. Certainly, there's at times opportunities to to make those ongoing. We have talked about some different revenue streams that might be available at that time. But right now, when we're hiring these people for like our teacher specialists that we're actually hiring from within, we've already shared with them that this is one-time money, and this job is a temporary position. Now, those teachers, once that money goes away, they will just fall back into the regular teaching population, so they won't lose their job. But they know they're being pulled out of their current teaching position to fill that role, and they know that it's a 2-year. We've told most of them it's a 2-year. With this new round of money, we might be able to afford a 3rd year, but we're not 100% sure. Same thing with the mental health piece. The person that I reached out to this past week, I told them that it would probably, I can guarantee, at least 2 years, possibly a 3rd. And there might be Title I monies or other funds available to make it ongoing, because that's definitely a direction that a lot of districts are going. But I am not guaranteeing that these are long-term positions. So with that in mind, we know that's going to be several $1 million of that money. And then the other monies we're going to dedicate towards, shoring up our facilities and looking to prepare us for, the next several years and possibly even in the next several decades as we look to, set us up for not only success this year, but next and the future years when it comes to our facilities. So with that being said, Madam President, that's all I have to share with you tonight. If you have any other questions, now is the time to ask them. If not, I'll turn it back over to our president. Thank you very much. Sandra? Is she on there, Andrew?
Yeah, it doesn't look like she's on there.
I think we lost her.
Okay.
Wait. She might have tried to rejoin. Hold on.
She's calling me right now.
There, I fixed her up.
Yeah, I'm here. I've been watching this whole time. I just haven't. There you are.
Okay, so she is okay. So our president has been watching the whole time, and
for some strange reason, now I'm Homer Simpson.
No.
No. Shame on you, Andrew.
I love
it. If there are no other further questions, I'd like to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. No further questions. Let's adjourn the meeting. Have a good dinner, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Madam
Thank you,
President.
Have a great evening.